Welcome back, WN. I love football season, and it's even more fun when you can kick the Patriots in the teeth a little bit and they're not on your schedule. At some point, maybe this is the year they have to come here and play the Baltimore Ravens and don't have the locker room bugged or whatever else is rumored out there. Ian O'Connor is the New York Times best-selling author of The Captain and Arnie and Jack, and he has taken on perhaps the deepest, thickest, strangest, most out there figure we have in modern times, which is Bill Belichick. The book is Belichick, and it has incredible Baltimore roots from the Baltimore Colts fields up at Goucher and Dad down in Annapolis and all of the seeds that were sown here in the Maryland turf. Ian, good day to you. I'm holding the book up for everybody on the camera to see just how thick it is. And this is like a real book. This is like a grown-up New York Times kind of book. There have been a lot of books on the Patriots and all sorts of Deflategates and all that sort of stuff. But, boy, this is the real deal when you're taking on this subject because this is sort of the Lombardi of our time, right?
That's right, Nestor, and thanks for that introduction. I interviewed 350 people for it for a reason. I wanted it to be a defining portrait of the man, not just the coach. And Bill did not cooperate, of course. I guess most people would have guessed that going in, and I certainly did when I signed up for the project 3 years ago.
But it's not about him. It's about people talking about him, right? Or his impact, right?
Right. I imagine someday he might decide to do his own book, although maybe not, given his persona. But I wanted to talk to as many people in his football life as possible. And people who knew his father and played for his father. Even I talked to 90-year-old guys who played for his dad at Hiram College in Ohio, both football and basketball, and just to try to get the essence of the man. A lot of conversation around the book regarding the Brady-Belichick relationship, the fracture in it last year. This book is not really about that. I wrote 455 pages and about 213,000 words on the man's life. And the Brady thing last year is part of it, certainly, but it's not really the essence of the book.
Let me say this. I don't know Bill. I've spoken to Bill on a handful of occasions. I was doing a book and still sort of in the midst of leadership and people who were affected by Baltimore, and he's one of them, right? He came from the Colts tree. He came from the Navy tree, and there's so much Baltimore and lacrosse built into him. But let me start by saying this. I've been doing this 27 years in Baltimore. I've written a couple of championship books on the Billick regime as well as the Harbaugh regime, and the people that I know that have touched Belichick was sort of everybody that came off the boat from Cleveland. From Art and David Modell to Ozzie to Kevin Byrne to Jimmy Schwartz, who I was trapped in a room with for 3 years that considered himself a protege, and all of those people. And at that particular point, there was some real humble pie for Belichick to go back, what happened with him and all the drama with the Jets and the Patriots and which job he was going to take and whether all of this might have been in the Jets' kingdom. But boy, Belichick entered the world for me in Baltimore at that point as this genius defensive guy, but maybe didn't communicate well enough to run his own ship.
Well, I think a lot of that is true, and if not all of it. And Belichick was a guy who, as you recall, Nestor, he was going to coach the Ravens. I mean, they were taking him with them to Baltimore. That was the plan. He got fired on Valentine's Day. So, and talking to people in Cleveland, people in that organization, the plan was for Bill to coach in Baltimore. And that would have been sort of a full circle experience for him, given just how much Baltimore and Annapolis meant to him and his family. And what happened was, as they were making the move from Cleveland, Bill was not giving them enough space to try to close deals with banks in the move and so forth, and he was making demands on personnel and staff, and Art Modell and other executives said, we've had enough. We have to make a change. He was going to coach the Ravens. And so it's an interesting fact that I think.
But they were selling football here with a dour man who knew nothing but dour in Cleveland, and they had Purple Sunshine to sell here, and more than that, they had PSLs they had to sell here as well. And I remember it vividly, and everyone around me just told me what a miserable human being he was, and that bringing him to Baltimore, he was not really down with the move, right? Like Steve Everett came off the boat, and Tony Jones, these significant players on the team that were very, very anti-Art and David while still drawing a paycheck, and that was it was a mess, as you know. I mean, Art's in hiding, and the dogs are, and Bill stood right in the middle of all of that, right?
Yeah, but I'm telling you, the plan was he was going to coach that team in Baltimore, and everything you just said is accurate. And what happened there in Cleveland was, and he admitted this before the first Super Bowl victory over the Rams in the 2001 season, is he tried to be too much like Parcells in Cleveland. He didn't have the charisma and the personality to pull it off. And all the Browns I talked to, some of them made the trip to Baltimore, they said they didn't want to play for the guy. They didn't want to win for him because they didn't think he cared about them as human beings. Now, Anthony Pleasant, who was on that Cleveland team and then later played for Bill in New England, he said that in New England, he definitely saw a difference in Belichick. In the way he ran practice, he realized that the human body can take only so much pounding. He finally realized that. And also, behind closed doors, he did actually try to care about you as a person and about your family. And so there was a point in that 2001 season where Pleasant, who was part of the Browns team that did not want to play for this guy, and there was a real disconnect in Cleveland, he said, I looked him in the eye, and I wanted to win a championship for this man because I felt he did care about us as people, as human beings. So he did learn from his mistakes in Cleveland. He did not connect with anyone there, and that's the reason ultimately they decided to pull the plug. But I can tell you for a fact, the original plan was Belichick was going to be the dour face of the Baltimore Ravens, and that's why he didn't get fired until Valentine's Day.
The book is Belichick, and Ian O'Connor has done the sort of the seminal take and the big, thick Michener-style look at, this is a big, thick book about a really interesting guy and a lot of views on him, and certainly of where fairness would be, right? And, I guess we're speaking to emotional intelligence about maybe something he lacked, but, Bill doesn't mind cheating, and I guess that's part of the reason that he is a little bit of a pariah outside the circle. I remember when all the original videotapes in the trees and all that stuff came out. Billick had just been fired here, and Billick is my partner in Baltimore on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation and what we do at WNST. And Billick said to me that one of the things that really offended the coaches was that everybody's cheating. And Brian's like, no, we're not. I'm up all night game planning. I'm not up all night cheating. And the notion that coaches are up in the middle of the night trying to cheat didn't sit well in the circles where guys aren't cheating.
Well, I think when he was in Cleveland, there was a lot of cheating going on, including by Bill. That was Al Davis's league, and I do believe that a lot of franchises were involved. Now we're going back a generation, but when you go to New England, I would say that Billick is accurate, particularly as it relates to once we hit 05, 06, 07. Now the league had sent out 2 memos telling people if you're filming improperly, illegally from the sideline, coaches giving signals, stop. And that second memo, which was early 07, that was directed right at the Patriots because they were the only team left who was still doing it, right? So here's the question that if I got...
And it pissed everybody off, right?
And if I got...
Royally.
If I was able to ask Belichick a question, like he did not agree to cooperate with this book. He did not sit down with me. But if he did, one question I would have asked is, Eric Mangini's the head coach of the Jets, that season opener in Giants Stadium, 2007. Bill had the best team he ever had, right? So Mangini sent the warning to Belichick. Obviously, he had institutional knowledge of the program, the Spygate program, in Foxborough. And he said, do not do this in our house. So I think if Belichick had shut down the operation for 1 week and resumed it, he would have been fine. I don't think Mangini would have cared that he did it against whoever it might be, the Dallas Cowboys, Kansas City Chiefs, whatever. Just don't do it against us in our building. Well, Bill did it, and they caught him. And in the book, I've got 3 characters in Spygate who've never been written about or interviewed in the past. They were an FBI agent, an undercover police officer, and a state trooper, and they ended up in a back office at Giants Stadium with the Patriots on one side, arguing for their confiscated camera to be returned, claiming it was stolen property, and the Jets on the other saying this is corporate espionage, we want that camera handed to the NFL. So these 3 guys decided this case. They refereed it for about a half hour in an office, and ultimately if they handed that camera back to the Patriots, Spygate never happened. And I think Belichick would have shut it down because the risk would have been too great going forward. But instead, those 3 officers handed the camera to the NFL, and that changed the way America looked at Belichick's program and organization forevermore.
Well, I mean, we got stories of people believing that the locker room's bugged. But then there's the Ravens' involvement in Deflategate, right? And, I've always assumed it sort of came out of the Chuck Pagano tree that came from the Dean Pease tree. And that's how these stories happen. They're whistles that get blown because at this point, and still beating Miami in a game early in the season when they're not supposed to. They're still winning, and they're still there, and there's a paranoia that's probably not healthy, even amongst the owners who believe that, even in the aftermath of Deflategate, that the Patriots have just gotten away with this and just stolen rings.
Nestor, I can't tell you how many executives and coaches and scouts I talked to that said when they traveled to Foxborough, they were really concerned about information being lifted out of hotel ballrooms, out of trash cans, out of their locker room even. And so I called the league I contacted the league to try to get a confirmation that nobody employed by the Patriots had ever been caught doing that. I didn't get a response, but publicly anyway, the league has never identified a situation where the Patriots were caught taking somebody's game plan, scouting information, whatever, out of a locker room or even a hotel ballroom where the opposing team was staying. But they spent so much time, these teams spent so much time and energy worrying about the Spygate-like espionage that I think it affected and impacted negatively their chances of winning the game in Foxborough. I really do. And so now how much of it was true, how much of it was chasing ghosts, I don't know. I do know the Patriots, I believe, were never caught doing that. Do I believe they probably did it at times? Yeah. In fact, in Cleveland anyway, I mean, I have a confirmation from people in the organization that Bill instructed a scout to go to a Giants-Jets preseason game and wait for the coaches to leave the box, the press box, after the game and go through the trash in both of their respective boxes, and see if they just crumpled up some old game plan information that could be of use to the Cleveland Browns. And so it's something that he has done in the past, and it was amazing to me how many teams spent time and energy on that issue when they played in Foxborough, more so by far than any other building in the NFL.
Well, that would say that they fundamentally believe he's crooked. Literally, like that after all that's happened, the people that have been around him would indict him in that way. And it's fascinating for me. The more I think about it, my two football books, the first one was a lot of Belichick leftovers of how Marchibroda found the organization. Then they won a championship. But even the second book, the last phone call Steve Bisciotti made before he hired John Harbaugh was to Bill Belichick. Belichick recommended Harbaugh because they sat together at combines and watched guys run around in shorts and had made a relationship in that way as football guys. And, Ian O'Connor is from the New York Times and has written this incredible book. Can you give me a little background on the writing of the book and the genesis of starting this? Because, look, you've been researching this. You're a football fan. You're a football writer. You're, an insider in all of this. But then you go back to talk to hundreds of people. The basis of doing this was sort of to write the biography of where he came from. I just want to understand what's inside the book, soup to nuts.
Right. Well, his lack of cooperation, I would have interviewed hundreds of people anyway, but certainly I must have contacted Nestor more than 500 people. That's a conservative estimate, to get 350 to talk to me, because a lot of people are afraid to talk about Bill Belichick. He's still active. It's not like he's retired or no longer with us on the planet. He's very much the active head coach of the Patriots. But I always thought of him as the most fascinating, I don't know if you agree with this, but the most fascinating figure in American sports. And I don't think there's a close second. So there was that. There was also, I wrote a column in 2000 when he got hired by the Patriots saying this is a bad hire. So I've been haunted by that column ever since, and Patriots fans have reminded me of it on social media quite a bit. So I was fascinated by how wrong I was, and I think at the time 75% of the NFL agreed with my opinion. And so how did this happen? How did this human being that we saw in Cleveland build this dynasty at a time in the NFL where everything, the salary cap, the schedule, free agency, the cap, are all designed to prevent you from having a dynasty? And AFC East incompetence is certainly part of that, but that's not Bill's problem. And I will say this about Harbaugh, by the way, that recommendation from Belichick. Harbaugh was in position in 2014 to really surpass Bill as the best coach in the league. He had beaten him in the playoffs a couple of times in Foxborough, on the verge of doing it again. He had two 14-point leads in that game before the funky formations. So Belichick was right in giving that recommendation because John turned out to be an excellent head coach. But in writing this, I wanted to go beyond football and really present the human being and the person you don't see at the podium and news conferences. And it's a Jekyll and Hyde act. His friends and associates told me that, believe it or not, America, he can be charming and engaging and kind and generous away from the stadium. And so I have a lot of anecdotes in the book about that, sort of painting that picture of the full human being. And a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into this over 3 years. Belichick not only did not cooperate, but he asked some people not to talk to me. He put a lot of hurdles in front of me, Nestor. It was almost, I felt like I was one of his players, like he was trying to make it really difficult for me, and in a sense, it made me better. It made me better as a reporter because I had a lot of hurdles I had to clear, and I'll let the reader ultimately judge whether or not I successfully cleared those hurdles.
How many folks went OTR with you, on it, or to give background, or didn't want their name associated? I would think a lot of them said, "I'll talk to you, but not my name in that book." Not in 2018 anyway.
Exactly, right? If 10 years from now, maybe somebody writes a better book where people feel more liberated to talk on the record. But no, I don't know a number, and I don't know if I'd give it if I knew it. But there were a lot of people who went on background and were willing to provide information, and a lot of it was positive because some of them were close to him and like him. Not everyone is an enemy in the NFL of Belichick, and wanted to paint that other side and wanted it out there. Because I did say to some of his associates who like him, if you guys want that humanity to be part of the public picture, you have to be willing to tell those stories. And so they did, and even a guy like his defensive coordinator now, de facto defensive coordinator, Brian Flores, told me a story that a couple years ago they were in a dogfight in that first playoff game against the Texans. Their whole season's on the brink, and at halftime, his pregnant wife in the stands ends up getting rushed to the hospital. She thinks she's going into labor. Basically, her water broke. She calls Brian at halftime, says, "Hey, it looks like this thing's going down." And now he approaches Belichick hesitantly. It was a tight game. They weren't playing well, and he was kind of afraid to approach Belichick to ask, "Is it okay to leave?" Belichick said, "Brian, it's your wife. Of course, go. If you need to leave and be with her, go." Well, I guess he was ready to, and then his wife called again from the ambulance and said, "I'm stabilized. They don't think the baby's going to come till the morning." So you might say, and so he stayed for the second half, and the Patriots won and then won the Super Bowl. And you might say any boss in America should do that and have that kind of humanity. But I do believe there are a lot of people around the country who don't know Belichick other than what they see on TV, who would be surprised to know that in a playoff game that was tense at halftime, he was ready to let a very important member of his staff walk away to be with a wife who was her life wasn't in danger or anything like that. So stories like that, I think, were important to this book to give you that complete picture of him as a man and not just as a coach.
Well, the Patriots in general. By the way, Ian O'Connor is our guest. The book is Belichick. Just last thing for you on the Patriots. And I mean, they've had murderers in that locker room now. They've had cheaters. They do nothing but win. Brady is, will always be part of the story for them, and Kraft and politics and Trump. The story's not over yet, and I think that's the more fascinating part is how a 41-year-old quarterback who's eating avocado ice cream and has his TB12 and all the palace intrigue of this offseason, I have every reason to believe they'll be playing football in January, don't you?
Yeah, I actually think they have one more ring left in them. I don't know if it's going to be this year. That roster does look a little thin to me, but I think that 6 is important to them. It breaks the tie for Belichick with Lombardi if he gets to 6. A lot of great athletes have tried to get to 6 to match Michael Jordan and have failed. Magic Johnson, Kobe Bryant, Derek Jeter. A lot of guys get stuck on 5, which is a great number. And I talked to Brady about that. I had him on the phone for almost an hour in March of 2017 and his legacy and Jordan. And I think 6 would mean a great deal to them. Also, the narrative would be, hey, you people, and I'm one of them, I guess to some extent, thought that our relationship was irreparably harmed and broken forevermore. And we came back, and we climbed the mountain one more time. Now, I could see that happening, and Belichick deciding, I'll walk away on that, and hand this baby over to Josh McDaniels, who I convinced not to take the Colts job. McDaniels and Brady have a very close relationship. So I could see Belichick maybe, this is the one feasible scenario of him not coaching the next 5-6 years, becoming president of the Patriots and having McDaniels and Brady finish it out the last 2-3 years and let them go for ring number 7.
Well, listen, I wish you great luck, success. I know the reviews have been off the chain, and it's big and thick. And I don't know if it's beach reading in this time of year, but certainly some winter reading for some plane rides on my NFL trips. Really appreciate you making some time to come on and make the show better and tell some stories. And the Belichick, Baltimore, Annapolis thing, right, the lacrosse thing, there's a whole other side of how much Belichick loves lacrosse in the spring too, right?
Oh, my! And by the way, George Young was the GM of the Giants.
Sure.
When Belichick, and he hated lacrosse players. He was a Baltimore guy, a tough guy from Baltimore, who did not think lacrosse players were real athletes.
George Young hated everything, man. He would come on my show 3 times a year just to yell at me. It was awesome.
That's right. But one of the reasons he couldn't stand Belichick and didn't give him the job was because Belichick was a lacrosse player. I always got a kick out of that. I'm sure Bill didn't, but I did.
I can almost hear him like in his curmudgeonly Baltimore. Those guys with those sticks, get him a football, get him a helmet. Yeah, I can hear it right now. Hey, Ian, I appreciate your time. As always appreciate your work. And now you can exhale and go back to doing all the rest of the work.
Hey, it was my pleasure, Nestor. Thank you very much.
You can find him out on Twitter at Ian_O'Connor, as well as on a bookshelf anywhere. Real books. It's like a real book. It's not like a Kindle thing. It's physical. It's got intangible qualities. You can turn the pages. You can highlight it. It feels nice. It's a book. The book is Belichick. I don't think the story will be all that warm and fuzzy. But some background, and no one's going to do it better than Ian O'Connor, longtime ESPN columnist and insider as well. You can find me out on the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get you in the best shape of your life. Also brought to you by the Maryland Jockey Club in Laurel, where they have built a beautiful sports bar down there, Vegas style. If you haven't been to Laurel lately, make sure you're getting down there, checking out the Maryland Million as well. Last but never least, any breaking news happens first. Orioles, Ravens, Terps on the WNST Tech Service. All brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, and Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday. Every Thursday, getting you ready for the Ravens game. From 3 until 5, it is the SSV on WNST. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore sports.